международная делегация из стран-членов Организации Исламской конференции. В предыдущих годах мы по линии Islamic Studies сотрудничали с Центром исламских исследований Оксфордского университета, совместно с которым мы проводили тоже конференцию, научный симпозиум «Аль-Фараби. Жизнь и наследие». И там активное участие принял сам директор Центра исламских исследований доктор Фархан Низами. И в ходе такого рода мероприятий в первую очередь, конечно, обсуждалась важность обращения к духовному наследию, а в конкретном случае с Оксфордским центром к духовному наследию Аль-Фараби не только в контексте процессов модернизации общественного сознания внутри Казахстана, но и формирования ценностных ориентиров подрастающего поколения. Одной из ключевых академических целей нашего факультета, в целом университета, это является содействие партнерству между исламским миром и западным миром. Идея сегодняшнего мероприятия, я думаю, станет толчком к налаживанию долгосрочного научного сотрудничества между нашими учреждениями с Институтом исламской мысли. Мы буквально вчера подписали с доктором Анасом меморандум о сотрудничестве. Надеюсь, этот меморандум даст хорошие плоды. Факультет философии и политологии в своей деятельности видит главную цель. Это наглядно показать, что глобальная миссия современного университета не должна ограничиваться подготовкой высококвалифицированных специалистов. Она заключается в формировании граждан мира с высокими духовно-нравственными ценностями, способных внести свой вклад в обеспечение устойчивого развития современного общества, ответственных не только за свою личную свободу, судьбу, но и за судьбу всего человечества. И сегодняшнее наше мероприятие, Международный форум «Вызовы постпривычного времени», которое посвящено как раз популяризации и продвижению идеи постпривычного времени, для нашего академического круга, для части сама концепция является новой, да, и требующей обсуждения, актуализации и применения данной теории к различным областям исследовательской работы. Основные направления конференции, они указаны в наших информационных письмах, которые были разосланы. Желаю продуктивного обсуждения. И здесь хочу отметить, что все материалы мы сейчас стримим на YouTube-канале Центра Аль-Фараби, где можно будет потом и по прохождении времени посмотреть, пересмотреть, переосмыслить те вещи, которые не смогли в офлайн режиме воспринять. Да? Конференцияға сәттілік. Бүгінгі салтанатты жиын тек тың пікірлер береді деп ойлаймын. Өйткені ойды ой тербейді. Осындай талқылаған кезде бізде 2 күн қатарынан қызу талқылаулар болады деп ойлаймын, соған үміттенемін. Сізге рахмет.
Thank you, Dr. Mirbayev, for this warm welcome. And if you look into the front page of our program, you can see a number of organizations that participated in preparation of this conference. There are 9 actually of them. And Dr. Mirbayev, he is the host. Now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Anas. He is a trustee and also academic advisor of the International Institute of Islamic Thought, and this organization, IIIT, is the leading guest for this university. Dr. Anas, floor is yours.
Like to once again extend my warmest thanks and appreciation to Associate Professor Dr. Bicham Mirbiev, to Dr. Elena, Dr. Khalid, Dr. Lili Khan, Amina, and all those hosting this event and involved in its planning and excellent organization. Following the signing yesterday of the MOU between the university and the IIIT, we very much look forward to a lasting cooperation between our two institutions with a view to evolving and strengthening that engagement and collaboration in the future. Kazakhstan is a remarkable country, not only for its rapid achievement in the growth and development over the last few decades, making it an important part of the international landscape, but also for having a rich history of faith, culture, and tradition. The IIIT was established in 1981. The IIIT was established in 1981 as an educational and academic institute that combines contemporary and traditional Islamic thought for contemporary times. It is dedicated to the benefit of communities living in diversity, providing ideas for dealing with present and the future challenges, as well as contributing to the advancement of a human civilization. The Institute achieves its vision by focusing on education, research, and knowledge creation and dissemination. In doing so, it stresses what is known as the integration of knowledge, which seeks to combine what we call the two readings: the reading of the revelation and the reading of the real existential, that is, of reality, time, and space. This is done through research, reports, publications, local, regional, and international workshops and conferences, and other events and programs internationally. So far, the IIIT has published over 600 titles in English and in Arabic, some of which have been translated into 39 languages. The occasional paper series, producing short papers in extended essay and booklet form, useful for audiences with limited time for reading, or those wishing to be briefed on a selection of critical and relevant topical issues. The books in a brief series built upon the success of the occasional paper series and forms a valuable collection of the Institute's key publications written in condensed form, designed to give readers a core understanding of the main contents of the original books. So the aim of the initiative was to produce short, easy-to-read works in a time-saving format to act as contemporary synopses, offering a close and carefully written overview of the larger publications. Capitalizing on the network of academics, authors, and intellectuals, the IIIT has established 3 peer-reviewed journals, one in Arabic, entitled Al-Fiqh al-Islami al-Mu'asir. It is an interdisciplinary journal established in 1985 and publishes on a wide variety of scholarly research on the social sciences, humanities, and Islamic thought and studies. The American Journal of Islam and Society, Ages, was established in 1984 and deals with issues similar to those published in the Arabic Journal. The Journal of Education in Muslim Societies, GEMS, is a new publication, a new education-themed journal established in 2019 and jointly published with Indiana University in the United States. It publishes fact-based research on educational issues produced by researchers worldwide. The IIIT research project is diverse in ideas and extensive in scope. Focusing on key concepts and disciplines, the project involves 17 groups and subgroups. Topics include, among others, universal values in the Quran, Western thought legacy, post-Norman epistemology, Islamic thought and language, philosophy and thought, and epistemology of hadith. These are being led by Dr. Baddi Ibnu. Professor Saddar is involved with one of its subgroups. Dr. Baddi also works in cooperation with the Academy of Values in Morocco, as well as with a number of organizations and academies worldwide. These 17 groups and subgroups comprise a team of scholars from leading universities in the United States, Europe, Turkey, and the Arab world. I do hope that some scholars from your esteemed university will consider joining the team and become involved in whatever capacity. I am delighted to say that the first outcome of the project is this book, which has just been published. Having been edited by Professor Sadar, I have no doubt that he will have a lot to say on the book and the process of its completion and publication. Education development is now one of our primary focus, and the Institute is putting significant efforts into a new initiative called the Advancing Education in Muslim Societies, AIMS. This education project commenced with a joint conference held in the United States in 2013 jointly with the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. It was followed by a series of roundtable meetings and intense discussions with scholars, educators, and academics, which took place between 2013 and 2014 in London, Paris, and Istanbul. An international conference on education was organized jointly with Istanbul University in 2016. This was followed by roundtable discussions at universities in Turkey, South Africa, and Malaysia. The project aims at responding to the crisis of education by providing effective research and means to develop students to becoming knowledgeable and productive by instilling in them values that contribute to the betterment of their societies and humanity. That empirical research survey carried out by the project reached over 40,000 youth and educators in 15 countries, including Kyrgyzstan, and its focus on the umbrella values, though to be thought to be essential to human development in the 21st century. That is open-mindedness, responsibility, and a collaborative collective orientation. The research aims to examine the socio-emotional and mental needs of youth and educators. The results and analysis have been published in 2 reports. In November this year, we are planning an international symposium jointly with the School of Education at the American University in Washington. Many other books on education were produced. Among them, Rethinking Reform in Higher Education, The Power of Education, and Teaching Children. The project has also initiated a Hope in Education book series to be jointly published with Indiana University in the United States. The first publication, entitled Education Transformation in Muslim Societies, A Discourse of Hope, is to go to print in November, inshallah. An essential component of the advancing education in Muslim societies, and well led by Dr. Hisham Al-Talib, the president of the Institute, is the issue of parent-child relations. Significant because the early education development of children forms foundational basis for their future achievement. In addition to various international workshops held on the project, a key work forming volume 1 of the projected series was published in 2013, entitled Parent-Child Relations, A Guide to Raising Children. It was subsequently translated into 18 languages. Volume 2 is currently in the final stages of production, and we hope to publish it late this year. During discussions with Dr. Hisham on Volume 2, it was agreed that we needed to incorporate a chapter on the issue of parenting in post-normal times to highlight the many complex and accelerating changes taking place in all aspects of modern life and the resulting challenges for parents to address possible future consequences. A future, incidentally, not too far removed from us, one in which it is projected that at least early childhood education, including parenting, will probably be taken over by robots. It is a remarkable forecast. In cooperation with Professor Sardar, a chapter was duly commissioned and produced. Recognizing the significance of the issue, I am delighted to say that one of the book's authors, Dr. Umar Al-Talib, who is with us today, will be speaking on the subject of parenting in post-normal times tomorrow. I must confess that I owe my own awareness and interest in future studies and the dimension that relates to parenting and education in general to another IIIT project we have initiated a few years ago. That is the Islamic Futures project, which is sponsoring our conference today. The Islamic Futures project consists of workshops, lectures, publications, and other events jointly organized with the Center for Postnormal Policy and the Future Studies. This project includes workshops organized annually in Istanbul, Sarajevo, London, Malaysia, and other places. They are intended for graduate and undergraduate students concerned with the futures of Muslim societies. These provide hands-on experience in the futures methodologies such as trend analysis and emerging issues. After learning the basic of future studies, participants are introduced to post-normal times theory and learn how to use it in their own work and research. An extremely important and innovative part of this project is the Atlas of Muslim Futures. The Atlas provides maps and extensive information on what is happening in the Muslim world in our rapidly changing present. You will be hearing a lot more on this during today and tomorrow from the three musketeers of future studies. And I'm glad none of them is French. Two books have been so far been published by the IIIT in this area, the Post-Normal Times Reader and the Muslim Societies in Post-Normal Times. Both have been translated into other languages. The IIIT Summer and Winter Schools project take place on international level, and the programs are designed primarily for graduate students interested in developing their knowledge and expertise in listed topics with contemporary relevance. They provide an opportunity for participants to present and discuss their research and workshops, and to engage interactively with the speakers and colleagues within and outside lectures. The schools are intended to broaden and develop young scholars into becoming effective contributors to the betterment of their societies and combine faith-based normativity with best academic practices and approaches. The schools are held annually in almost 20 countries. I'd like to thank you all for attending this event and hope that our next event here would be a summer school as part of the Silk Route Summer Schools program, which we have started with our current and first summer school in Kyrgyzstan. What the Silk Route actually promoted was the conduit of international dialogue and the phenomenal cross-cultural exchange. The 6,000-mile route lasted for centuries, testament to its intrinsic strength, surviving even amid territorial conflicts. It buzzed with many languages and languages connecting the East and the West in an incredible way, not in competition and enmity, so commonly the discourse of our time, but in shared creative genius. This gives a glimpse of what can be retrieved from the past to bring order to the chaos we find ourselves in today. I hope our summer schools, traveling from Bishkek through Almaty, along this route, will play a part in reviving the knowledge of and interest in some of the route's most important achievements and values. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Anas, for such a detailed and comprehensive presentation of the organization. Now, from the organizational level, we go to the individual, and our next speaker is Professor Natalia Sedakhmetova, Chief Research Fellow in the Institute for Philosophy, Political Science, and Religious Studies. And the topic is Ziauddin Sardar as a case of contemporary intellectual.
Уважаемый высокий форум, добрый день, мы приветствуем вас. Сегодня у нас такой праздник интеллектуальный, философский, потому что приехал весь цвет, по-моему, интеллектуального исламского мира, да? все те, которые занимаются вообще исламской философией, исламской мыслью. Большое вам спасибо, мы вас очень ждали. Тема моего выступления – это касается, конечно, вклада Зияуддина Сардара в современное вообще интеллектуальное сообщество, в современный мир. Великие люди обрекают нас на интерпретацию. В этом знаменитом высказывании Гегеля мы видим месседж такой одновременно пессимистический и оптимистический. Пессимистический, потому что а правильно ли мы интерпретируем? А оптимистически, потому что всегда есть возможность широкой, плюральной и разноплановой интерпретации. Сегодня мы интерпретируем творчество Зияуддина Сардара, человека с огромным количеством хиршей, человека, которого цитируют все время и везде, ну, особенно что касается нас. Мы одновременно, Сардар, Зияуддин, мы пытаемся понять вообще этого такого великого и одновременно такого близкого и очень простого человека. Интеллектуалы вообще несут нам новое знание, удивляя нас и давая возможность в интерпретации открывать горизонты видения проблемы. Творчество Зияуддина Сардара я бы назвала переоткрытием исламского логоса в 21 веке. Известное выражение Поля Рикера о том, что последняя треть 20 века – это ситуация распыления истории, можно применить вообще к такой ситуации, в которой оказался исламский логос, ситуация рассеивания. И как раз процесс обобщения его и процесс собирания оказался возможным в творчестве Зияуддина Сардара. Человечество вступило в состояние постмодерна, или, как говорит Юрген Хабермас, состояние незавершенного модерна, и, как говорит Зияуддин Сардар, в состоянии постпривычного времени. Этот опыт, которому нет аналога в истории, и он с трудом устраивается в нашем сознании. Мы все еще продолжаем интерпретировать этот опыт жизни, который невозможно увидеть через оптику классической философии, классической науки. Именно поэтому мы нуждаемся в критической оценке прежнего опыта философствования и формировании новых когнитивных стратегий. В исламском именно вот этой проблемой и занимается ученый. В исламском дискурсе он видит форму духовного соучастия и призыв к глобальной сотворческой коммуникации. Его учение я назвала бы, конечно, и глубоко личностным. Смело можно назвать Зияуддина Сардара энциклопедистом, поскольку круг его затрагиваемых проблем очень обширен. Целью исследования его является системное, конструктивное, комплексное переосмысление ислама как образа жизни и мышления, так называемое открытие, ну, я бы сказала, вообще переоткрытие ворот иджтихада. Понятие иджтихада трехконсонантного корня, которое образует и другое слово, которое соответствует значению прилежание, усилие, объясняется Сардаром как неустанный поиск знания, который сделал возможным беспрецедентный расцвет средневекового золотого исламского времени. Сардар четко дает понять свою позицию в отношении актуализации священного текста. Понимая необходимость трепетной рефлексии при изучении текста Корана, интеллектуал настаивает на том, чтобы знания, которые почерпнуты из него, пользовались в жизненной практике, продолжая быть релевантными, востребованными и понятными нам сегодня. Интеллектуал объясняет, что в Коране имеются все ответы на современные животрепещущие вызовы, и поиск этих ответов позволит не только реактуализировать великое исламское наследие, но и существенно обогатить его, сделать доступным для понимания как в исламском мире, так и на Западе. При этом Запад выступает не как географическое понятие, но как мировоззрение, стиль восприятия в отношении к культурному другому. Здесь ключевую роль играет не столько этничность или конфессиональность, а сколько как раз образ культуры мышления. Философское осмысление исламского наследия и мировоззрения позволяет увидеть ислам как аутентичную современность и интеллектуальную культуру, которая открыта к инновациям и модернизациям. Особого внимания в этой связи заслужит вопрос идентичности, который выдвигается на первый план и, выражая словами Хантингтона, цивилизационную идентичность. Цивилизационное значение ислама трудно переоценить. Об этом говорит Сардар, подчеркивающий, что ислам гораздо шире отождествляемый с ним свода как правового, так и этического. Ислам дает инструменты для критического осмысления предписаний и одновременной аксиологизации системообразующих и доказанных временем основ исламского мировоззрения. Он должен быть осмысляться в сегодняшних реалиях, как это было в золотую эпоху исламского средневековья. В книге Сардара «Постмодернизм и другой» интеллектуал предостерегает от слепого следования навязываемой массовой культуры образцам, которые способствуют продвижению вообще массовой культуре. Помимо уже упомянутых проблем, Сардар придает большое значение вопросам экологии. Интеллектуал проблематизирует отношение к экологии с точки зрения ислама. Но это знаменитая, конечно, тема, которая, по сути дела, вообще была поставлена исламскими знаменитыми философами, в том числе знаменитым Сейд Хусейном Насром, проблема экологии, проблема знаний и веры, органичного баланса. Говоря о ценностях, акцентируемых Сардаром, следует отметить их общечеловеческий универсальный характер, что на практике демонстрирует воплощение его знаменитой концепции Garden of Identity, сад идентичности. Исследователь с удовольствием отмечает немалое общее, которое объединяет мировые религии все и составляющие их аксиологическое духовное наполнение. Иными словами, вместо того, чтобы определять ислам через то, чем он не является, или вместо того, чтобы пытаться встроить ислам в современность, Сардар рефлексирует о качественном, ценностном наполнении ислама, его естественной интеллектуальной эволюции. Вот об этой интенции свидетельствует подход интеллектуала и к природе, как в исламе, так и к других конфессиям. Будучи автором знаменитой мусульманской декларации о природе «The Muslim Declaration on Nature», озвученной в 1986 году генеральным секретарем Всемирной исламской лиги Абдуллой Омаром Несефом, в рамках 25-летия Всемирного фонда дикой природы, Сардар исходит из понимания природы как того бесценного, что было верено Богом человеку как ответственному наместнику, который, по сути, не вправе распоряжаться ею по своему усмотрению. Человек должен выступать защитником флоры и фауны, которые созданы Господом и принадлежащих ему. Вот, собственно, эта концепция Зияуддина Сардара, она, по сути дела, сегодня вообще актуализируется вновь и вновь из проблем устойчивого развития и с проблемой вообще экологизации мышления человека, с формированием экологической ответственности, экологической культуры. Ну, в тексте мусульманской декларации он отмечает, что особенная черта людей, которая выделяет нас среди других творений, состоит в наличии разума и мышления. Именно это и делает нас ответственными за мир, который создан им. Помимо очевидных выгод от бережного отношения к окружающей среде, который предусмотрен в исламе, Сардар говорит и о сохранении мира, и о сохранении знаменитого, конечно, биологического разнообразия. И далее, конечно, мы понимаем, что это и культурное разнообразие. В центр исламской культуры Сардар ставит концепт знания, конечно. Это самый базовый концепт, который понимается как когнитивный процесс и как коммуникативная практика, которая передает мудрость. Интеллектуал неоднократно подчеркивает роль знания в наступлении в эпохи исламского средневековья, для которой характерно развитие всех доступных в то время знаний. Критическое осмысление, которое было характерно в целом для фальсафа, начиная от Аль-Кинди, Аль-Фараби, Ибн Рушда, и Мулла Садра, и огромные следующие вообще вот такие когнитивные поиски, которые были вообще в исламском мире, они, по сути дела, вот центрируются в философии Зияуддина Сардара. Огромное значение он придает вообще роли классического исламского наследия и говорит о том, что классическое исламское наследие, оно не осталось в прошлом, оно вообще есть, оно будет, и оно вообще в себе содержит эту знаменитую интенцию все время вообще преобразовываться и открываться вообще в новых условиях и в новом мире. Образ будущего ислама неразрывно связан с образом мусульман, который сформировался, конечно, в связи вот с печальными событиями 11 сентября 2021 года. И Сардар говорит, вот эта отправная точка, которая была в понимании вообще, скажем, каких-то негативных моментов, он говорит о том, что это нельзя вообще таким образом рассматривать и образ будущего ислама, и образ будущего мусульманина. И он говорит о том, что будущий мусульманин – это прежде всего критический мусульманин. Что понимается под это? Вот эта концепция, которая вообще вот меня лично, она потрясает. Вообще это отсылы и к критическому трансцендентализму Гегеля, и Фихта, и Шеллингу. Это вновь вообще воскрешение науки Канта о том, что необходима критическая рефлексия, чтобы все время вообще переосмысливать поскольку вообще открытие разума – это было самое главное открытие, вообще, которое существует, да, вообще, ну, скажем, в истории мысли, вообще в истории развития человека. И когда мы говорим о том, кто такой действительно есть мусульманин, Зиядин Сардар говорит, что это человек, который вообще в состоянии осмыслить, переосмыслить, и критицизм понимается не как критика, а именно вообще критическая рефлексия о мире. Критическая рефлексия о мире и встраивание самого себя в этот мир. Ну и завершая, конечно, о творчестве профессора Сардара можно говорить много, долго, да, и огромное количество работ, которые сегодня представлены им, и которые, да, цитируются, и которые сегодня мы, может быть, и не понимаем многое, как знаменитые греки говорили, когда однажды Сократ, перед Сократом выступал знаменитый философ, и его спросили: как вам понравилось это выступление этого философа? Сократ сказал такую фразу: ну, та часть, которую я понял, была прекрасна, а та часть, которую я не понял, наверное, еще более прекрасна. Поэтому, если это применить как раз к книгам Зиядина Сардара, наверное, мы вообще будем все время понимать и пытаться понять его. Но вот я хочу от имени философского нашего казахстанского сообщества, если я, конечно, вот имею право это говорить, выразить вам огромную благодарность, дорогой наш профессор, за ваши книги, за ваше вот это переоткрытие, переосмысление, за ваш консенсус диалога Востока, исламского мира и западного мира. Огромное вам спасибо за ваш труд. И я вот хочу сказать вот такую историю, как мы познакомились с профессором. У меня была докторантка Жанара Тургамбаева, которая защищалась по исламской философии, по адабу она защищалась. И мне нужен был руководитель научный. И я думаю, а почему бы мне не написать самому Сардару? И когда мне сказали: ты что, с ума сошла, Наталья? Как ты напишешь Сардару? Он разве тебе ответит? Я говорю, когда-то я написала письмо Фуату Сизгину, и он мне ответил. Я думала, может быть, Сардар мне тоже ответит. И я написала письмо, и Зиядин Сардар мне отвечает: да, я, говорит, согласен. Я была поражена, потрясена. Огромное вам спасибо за ваш, действительно, чем величественней человек, тем он проще. Большое вам спасибо за ваш труд. Мы продолжаем изучать ваши тексты и будем находить вообще то, что вообще нужно нам, как говорил Гадамар, потому что герменевтика – это не то, что вообще сказали, да, философы, а то, что вообще они искали, ту самую истину, к которой мы тоже стремимся. Огромное спасибо.
Thank you very much, Natalia Lvovna. So you expressed all the feelings and opinions from Kazakhstani, at least academic society who are present here. We've heard a lot about this person, whom the independent newspaper called Brits own Muslim polymath. And now, Ziyadin Sardar, floor is yours, whether to confirm or revert what was said about you before.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. There's no presentation.
Yes.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I'm suitably humbled. I certainly do not see myself as great as I've been described by Dr. Natalia. So I'm kind of speechless in that regard, but I'm suitably humbled, and I'm very, very pleased to be here. This is my first visit to Almaty, and inshallah, first of many. It's a wonderful city, and it's so good to see such esteemed colleagues eager to participate in debate and discussion, criticism and counter-criticism. The title I was given for my presentation was Postmodern Times, Theory, History and Current Developments. I have never thought of postmodern times in terms of history. So when I looked at the title, I was kind of taken aback a little bit. But our moderator, Dr. Yelena, it doesn't take no for an answer, so I didn't even bother trying to negotiate anything. I said, I will just do it. I just rang my colleague Jody, who's normally the first port of call when I find myself in difficulty, and I said, hey, but what are we going to do there? He said, well, sit down and write the history of post-normal times. So with the help of Scott, which is what I wrote down on a piece of paper, 15 points or something. So I'm going to now take you through the 15 points of history of post-normal times. In 1993, I became editor of Futures, which is the primary journal in the Futures Studies field. And before that, I was involved in futures research for over 20 years. And in fact, my first two books are essentially future studies book. I mean, The Future of Muslim Civilization, which came out in 1980, was published in 1979, and Islamic Future, The Shape of Ideas to Come, which was published in 1985, are essentially future studies books. And there were two things that bothered me about future studies right from the beginning. Going to various conferences, seminars, and I was a member of the World Future Studies Federation, which is where I first met Jody. Attending all those conferences, the first thing was that I saw future studies as much as something that explores the future, but also as something that colonizes the future. And that was an idea which was very difficult to grasp by many of my Western colleagues, that how can future studies be a tool for colonization. And in fact, in early 90s, the future studies was developing into a kind of well-established discipline, and the journal Sociology, which is again the primary journal of social science, decided to publish a special issue on future studies. It was going to be edited by Eleanor Massini, who was one of the doyens or grandmothers of future studies. And in fact, she trained Jody, she trained lots of young futurists. And she asked me to write a chapter write a paper for this special issue of sociology. So I wrote a paper called Colonizing the Future, where I explained how future studies can become a tool for colonizing the future. It's the only paper that I have written that was totally rejected. Sociology refused to publish, and Elena Massini, who liked it very much, was very embarrassed. She says, the referees are fine with it, but the journal does not want to publish this, right? So 2 years later, I became editor of Futures. So the first thing I did was to publish my own paper, Colonizing the Future, right? And it caused quite a stir. But at the same time, I was working with the gentleman you see on the screen. His name is Jerry Ravitz. He's a philosopher and historian of science. And Jerry became my mentor when I was an undergraduate studying physics at the City University. And he taught me most of the philosophy and history of science that I know. I mean, it made sure that I read certain key books and, insisted on taking me to certain key conferences, got some of my early papers, which were mainly on science policy, published. And Jerry was working on the current understanding of science. And he and his colleague, Silvio Fontrovich, realized that there was something strange happening in the world of science, that science itself was changing. And it was, it was not the classical notion of truth, scientists kind of revealing truth. Science was becoming corporatized, right? Many of the issues that science was dealing with were not really producing the answers that it's supposed to produce, and so on and so forth. And he then came up with the notion of post-normal science, that science is becoming post-normal. And this paper was published in 1993. The Jerry had the same problem as I had with my paper on colonizing the future. Nobody wanted to publish his paper, Science for the Post-Normal Age. So he turned to me, and in fact, we were kind of collaborating on this notion of science because I was working as a science journalist. He turned to me and says, what do I do with this paper? So I said, you do nothing. Now I'm the editor of Futures. I'll publish in Futures, right? So we published Jerry's paper, Jerry and Fontovic's Science for the Post-Normal Age, where Jerry came up with a formula that became very well known. Many facts are uncertain, values are in dispute, stakes high, and decisions urgent. That's what makes science post-normal, that science does not produce the concrete facts anymore, that many of the facts of science are extended facts, are uncertain, and the values are disputed, and given climate change and globalization and ecological problem, stakes are high, and of course you have to make urgent decisions. You may proceed. That paper, in fact, that paper is one of the most highly cited paper in, not just in future studies. I'm talking about Jerry's paper, not just in future studies, but also in kind of this general field of humanities and social sciences. It has literally thousands and thousands. And as a result of the paper, the whole movement of post-normal science started. A lot of people started questioning the nature of science. Professors started getting their students, PhD students, working on the notion of post-normal science, and post-normal science slowly kind of grew. And a couple of other things were happening at the same time. One was the emergence of complexity science. And we realized that I realized with some of my other colleagues, that it was not just in science that things were becoming complex, but things were becoming complex in the real world as well, outside science, right? And things were becoming complex in politics. Things were becoming, complex in kind of in governance. Things were becoming complex in economic system, and so on and so forth. So Jerry and I did a special issue of Futures on complexity. Now, at that moment, we were not sure whether complexity was real or it's just another fashion. So, in fact, the subtitle of the issue is Complexity, Fad or Future. So that grounded, if you like, grounded me and some of the people that I was working with in the notion of complexity. And at about the same time, with the complexity emerged the notion of, emerged the whole idea of chaos theory, popularized in the first Jurassic Park, is it? Where I think Jeff Goldblum explains what chaos is in terms of the butterfly effect. Now, when I did a number of these textbooks, they're graphic guides in the sense they have cartoons in them, and the story is told through cartoons. So I was asked to do one on chaos. So originally it was called Chaos for Beginners. But when the book came out, chaos was just another theory, like complex theory, right? But within 6 months, it sold like hundreds of thousands of copies, right? It just went boom, right? Became a kind of international bestseller. And to my surprise, chaos became very big. And I realized that at one particular moment in time, when a young person who was 14 years of age did a TED Talk, and somebody sent me the video of the TED Talk, and the young person arrives on the stage holding a copy of the book, and he says, a book has changed my life, this book. And he holds up Introducing Chaos, to the shock, right? And proceeds to say that because of all the chaos that is going to emerge in the future, my life has changed. I have to now rethink myself. I'm not going to follow on the patterns of my parents, but I have to totally rethink what the future is all about and what kind of world I'm going to grow up in, right? So that was, so this young person taught me a great deal. I was not thinking of chaos theory in that term. So a lot of these ideas were coming together. And after about 14 years of editing Futures, I decided to, move on to other things, and the publishers say, okay, you're leaving the editorship of Futures. Would you like to, tell us what you have learned in the last 14 years? And so I went back to look at what kind of papers we had published in Futures in the last 14 years. And of course, the notion of complexity came about again and again. Lots of paper was talking about emerging, chaotic behavior. And I also noticed that a number of papers were talking about how society is becoming more and more contradictory. So what I did was synthesize the three things, and this is one of the kind of second last paper I published in Futures, called Welcome to Post-Normal Times, where I first kind of formulate that the post-normality is not limited to science, it's becoming a global and universal phenomena. And I kind of came up with a very specific definition of post-normality. I described it as an in-between period where all orthodoxies, including the orthodoxy of science, are dying. New ones have yet to be born, and very few things seem to make sense. That is, it's a transitory period where we have to cope with the dying paradigms, yet we do not have new ones, and we have to work towards creating new ones. And how do we navigate this period, this in-between period? And again, I thought nothing of it. I published the paper, and the first thing I know, this chap is ringing me and saying, "Zia, you solved all my problems." And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I think we are into something here. This is why lots of the future stuff we tend to be doing is not working, because the present itself is changing, right? And we seem to think that when we do futures work, we regard the present as kind of static and constant, right? And we need to kind of rethink lots of future studies in a way. But of course, there were lots of criticism as well, right? And the general futures were inundated by all sorts of kind of comments on the notion of post-normal times for and against. But the paper did formulate what we now call the post-normal factors, the three things about post-normal times. That post-normal times is essentially dominated by, shaped by, call it what you like, by complexity, by contradictions, and when they combine together with positive feedback, they lead to chaos. And later on, we developed various icons to as shorthands for these things. So you will see these icons appearing throughout. We use them in teaching as well. So that's how far the post-normal times theory was at that moment in time, when criticism and counter-criticism and support for the theory and attacks on the theory started to emerge. And so we were forced to do a special issue, and it was edited by my very close friend and colleague of decades, Melvin Davis. And if I expected anybody to say to me, well, this post-normal times theory is good solid stuff, friend, Meryl did not. She just attacked it. So my closest friend literally went out with a hammer to say, there is something wrong here, right? It just doesn't work. And she edited the guest issue. And the introduction is called, Are We There Yet? Because she just did not, to really blow the whole thing off. And a lot of the criticism was, the nature doesn't work in 3 C's, right? Why do you need these iterations, right? So that's where situation stood, and I had to step back. I had to step back and say, look, I as an individual thinker, intellectual, whatever you like to call it, futurist, I can't handle this, right? This is a complex problem, and complex problems need complex solutions. And I need a network of people, right? Now, that was a period in the kind of, towards the end of the noughties, that it was realized that essentially to deal with complex problems, you need complex approaches. It's called the law of requisite varieties. And the best way to do that is to have networks of people with divergent views, with different perspectives, with different ideas, with different notions. So I managed to pull a network of people together. This, apart from me, Jody Serra is here. John Sweeney was a young scholar in those days. I met him in Hawaii, where I was asked to give a keynote address on the future of journalism. And I asked him, what do you want to do in the future? He said, I want to work for Ziauddin Sardar, and I want to work on post-normal times theory. So I said, fair enough, you join the network. We don't have anything to give you. And then we had two very strong critics, then both females, Marilyn Davis on that side, and Wendy Schultz, who's also my very close friend, who's going back 20, 30 years, a very well-known futurist. There she is. The first thing she said, if there is no normal, how can you have post-normal, right? So we had to deal with normality. What is normal, right? Our first outing of post-normal, go back a bit, our first outing of post-normal times theory was at Crichton University, where me and John Sweeney went. It was all very nascent. We were not sure of some of the ideas, but we said, let's try it out. So for some reason, Crichton University invited us to give a lecture. We said, okay, we'll give it on post-normal times. So they said, what is it? We said, we don't know what it is, but we'll give it a lecture anyway. So they made a very nice poster. We turned up, right? And, you know, there were like 100 faculty members, and then we gave a, presentation of me and John together, gave a presentation of post-normal times. This is what we think. Again, mixed reaction. And then a young man came along and says, actually, this is not a bad idea. I like to work with you. So I said to him, fair enough. We are based in Chicago. If you can find your way to Chicago, you can come and join our, brainstorming sessions. And that was young Scott there. He was very young in those days. He's still young, but not as young, little less. And he drove all the way from Omaha to Chicago to attend our network meetings, which was basically theory development meetings. And we basically asked ourselves a series of questions. So one of the first questions was, okay, if post-normal times, the main factors of post-normal times are chaos, complexity, and contradictions, what causes post-normal change? How does this change come about? Right. And we came with, what are the drivers? What is pushing this what is pushing us towards post-normalcy? And we came up with all right, let's move on. There to see. Hey, have we jumped the gun? No. All right. Okay. And we thought very, very hard. And we used to have these meetings at East-West University, who basically, because I had friends there, we kind of persuaded them to give us some funding so we can bring people together. Right. So on the 17th floor of the the new building of East-West University, we used to have a workshop and asking. You notice that in one of these we have the earth in front of us, telling you that the earth is being transformed by post-normality, and all of our critics are there shouting at us and telling us we are wrong. But it was a very good kind of, this is how kind of thought develops. So criticism and counter-criticism, we had a kind of very productive. And at the end of the day, we came up with how does post-normality emerge? What are the drivers? And what are the underlying dynamics? And we came up with three things that essentially the world is changing very, very rapidly. Things are moving very, very fast, right? Not just things are moving very, very fast, but they tend to be global in nature, and then they have an impact on individuals. So if you look at pandemic, for example, it spread very, very quickly, had a global impact, had, individuals got infected, right? So that was our kind of main thing, but we were not really satisfied that's not enough. And then came none other than the United Nations General Secretary to our rescue. I don't know whether he knew anything about post-normal change or not, but he said that it's not just that things are moving fast and global and all that. It's not just that we have one crisis after another crisis, but the important thing is that all these crises emerge at the same time, right? And that clinched the notion, so we added the idea of simultaneity. So the 4 S's, so the 3 C's are being driven by 4 S's: speed, scope, scale, and simultaneity. So then we had a kind of reasonable theory at that moment in time, a theory that could explain things of what was going on. But then we had to also ask the question that if post-normality emerges, how do we recognize it? So we developed a number of notions. The first notion was lag, which is basically you don't recognize it, you don't see it, you don't appreciate it, right? So climate deniers, for example, are clearly, climate change is a reality. Now we are, at this moment, we are actually living through it. So those who do not recognize the obvious post-normal situation, we lag. Then I kind of developed the notion of creep, that post-normality moves slowly. Initially, it moves very, very slowly. And you wouldn't believe that my colleagues didn't know what creep is. These guys had no idea what is a creep. So I had to get on the floor and show them what a creep is physically for them to appreciate what is the creep. So then that notion was established. And then, of course, when things finally happen, there's a post-normal bust. So there's the final point where things become so clearly post-normal that you cannot deny it in any way. So that point we call bust. Again, it was okay, we were doing, but still something was missing that we felt. How do you kind of appreciate post-normality when you can notice the creep, but you are not sure? And me and Scott were going to a conference organized by Dr. Biddy in Brussels, and we were sitting in the train, and the train was moving like that. And I said to him, well, that's what you experience, right? There's a train moves, it tilts, right? So there's a tilt aspect of the post-normality. When you encounter a post-normal phenomena, the first thing you do, you accept it. If you don't accept it, you suffer from post-normal lag. Then the next thing, you can notice that post-normality is creeping towards you in some form or fashion. But you know that for sure when you come to the tilt, when you actually feel, that things are actually going post-normal, and then when there's a final post-normality, you have the bust. So that's where things stood. And then I wrote what came to be, I think, the final, a couple of years after I left, but one of the final big papers on this issue, while I still was, reasonably closely attached to futures, where I replied to all the criticism that was presented on post-normal times. Each critic got a treat. Each level of criticism got treatment, and I put the whole kind of theory together. Post-normal times we visited. And at about the same time, the East-West University ran out of money and basically threw us out. And so it was a point where I did have to have a glass of water, because things would have ended there. And I was reasonably satisfied. I said, okay, all right, we've done enough. Let the rest of the world, carry on, right? We kind of brought it all together. But God moves in mysterious ways. And one mystery in my life was Dr. Anas, and he was suddenly revealed to me, unknotted, and International Institute of Islamic Thought came to a rescue. There was a meeting at a restaurant that he had organized with Dr. Jamal Bazinji, who was one of the trustees and a leading thinker of IIIT, the late Jamal Bazinji. And I remember sitting in a restaurant with a napkin explaining post-normal times theory to him. And he was saying, no, it doesn't work. And I kept on doing it. And it was something suddenly clicked in him. And he says, yes, we will support you. Because it works. And he did. right? And basically we exist as CPPF and the whole development of post-normal times because of IIIT. And I kind of regard IIIT as part of the shaping of the post-normal times theory, because the collaboration between us and IIIT, first of all, liberated us from financial constraints. We had no money, for example, even to have a website or do anything like that, basic stuff. We couldn't bring the people of the network together. There was no Zooming in those days. So that was a major thing. And we were able to consolidate the network. The network, you know, when people can meet physically in one location, they develop relationship. So I come here for the first time, met all of you, will develop a relationship. So I'll come here second time, we'll understand each other better. So we brought the network actually became really a thinking exercise, right? And we kind of got together to really argue. I remember people really challenging. Do we, you know, when the idea of the tilt was missing from the theory, there was a great deal of challenge that something is missing here, right? And everybody kept on saying, I'm not satisfied with this, right? There's something wrong. That's how we eventually developed the idea of tilt. And but more important, when you develop certain ideas, you need to test it with some people. Right? Not just like-minded people, not just critics, but some fresh minds. And IIIT gave us this phenomenal opportunity and ability to test it at workshop level. And in fact, I remember the first workshops we did on post-normal times were done at my home. Right? And then later we did them in Istanbul, in Sarajevo, and at each workshop we kind of learned something new, right? And kind of shape the theory. As a result, the network expanded, but John Sweeney left because he wanted to make have a better salary elsewhere. In fact, I think he came here. Yes. John Sweeney left CPPF and came to this very institution, right? Okay. But many of our critics then actually became part of the network because they were by now not just convinced, but actually helping shaping the network. And we kind of developed a whole variety. It is important for me to point out one or two individuals and their contributions. So you see right at the bottom, in the middle, a very young Spanish lady, Elizabeth. Now Elizabeth is very young and dynamic, and she's very clever, but I do not understand a word she says. Not a single word that I understand what she says. But it is what Natalia was saying in the closing marks about Socrates' comments, that what you don't understand may be even more profound than what you understand, because she really is glued to the alternative digital subculture. Their language is totally different. What is going on there is absolutely phenomenal and will have profound effect on societies and our futures. We have to understand, right? So she brings an incredible kind of dimension to the discussion. Even though I don't understand it, but some of my other colleagues do. They have a better understanding of what is going on. Just to give one example. So this is a very diverse network. With kind of different perspectives, people are going for their different position. The gentleman, Chris, can you show Chris? Yeah, there. Chris Jones is again very old friend of mine. We were together in World Future Studies Federation. Then he gave up future studies and dropped out. And I didn't hear from him for about 15 years. And when the second paper came out, Post-Normal Times Revisited, he sent me an email saying, this is what I've been looking for. Finally, we can do something positive with our future work in the world, right? So he then became a member of the network. So it's a very diverse, and it's the strength of the ideas, the strength of the network. You see, the days of great men are gone, right? Hopefully they'll be replaced by some great women, but even that we need network of people. We need perspectives from different people from different perspectives. We need, a gender perspective. We need young perspective. We need disciplinary perspectives, and that's what CPPF is all about. So with all that, we were able to develop our ideas much further. Hang on. We were able to develop our ideas much further. We had many IIIT workshops. As I said, in Istanbul. So you see here, Wendy shows one of our main critics at the beginning, really attacking us, is now actually a very much part of the gang. She actually teaches future studies and post-normal at times. So I think this is a workshop in this is in Malaysia, and the bottom one is, I don't know where, London. Okay. So we have a number of workshops that kind of help us. There's one in my house. The top one is in my house, by the way. I mean, that's one of the first ones we did, right? Yeah. Istanbul, yeah, London, all right. More workshops. No, this one is in Yalina's. Yeah. This one at the bottom. No, no, you're not there. Okay.
Is one of the Kuala Lumpur's digital.
Okay, yeah. But that one is in Bosnia, yes. Okay, let's move on there. Okay. Are we stopping there? Okay, and then of course we were able to develop our website. And when we were developing a website, it became quite clear that people will ask, well, how does post-normal times differ from, say, post-modern times? Or how does post-modern times differ from modern time and classic period? So we developed this timeline. I wrote a paper called Post-Normal Artifacts. And one of the unusual aspects of the website is the timeline, which takes you through classic, modern, postmodern, post-normal notions. So if you, for example, go back one slide. No. Yeah. So for example, when you're talking about meaning, which is so in classical, of course, Descartes, I think, therefore I am, and modern, I progress, therefore I am. And postmodern will be, I shop, therefore I am, and Warhol, and postnormal, I share, therefore I am. So it's actually kind of profound, but also witty. Right? It really tells you the difference. So that's the unusual thing about the timeline. So now we were positioned to ask even more deeper questions, right? With the kind of work we had done with IIIT. So we had to ask two fundamental questions. How can we spot emerging post-normal phenomena? And how does post-normal phenomena change the future? Which was the essential basic exercise in the first place. How is the future changing? We know the present is changing, but that's what post-normal times theory tells us. But how is the future changing in relation to post-normal times, and what does that mean? So to have the first question, how do we kind of spot it? We came up with the idea of the menagerie. That there's black elephant. Black elephant is a obvious issue situation that is staring you in the face, but you do not recognize it. So it's a classical thing. And black swan, somebody has actually mentioned that they read Talib's book on black swan. The black swans are kind of outer layer phenomena which you disregard but can have major impact when it actually materializes. To that, we added the notion of black jellyfish. And here again, we had intense debate and discussion. What is the phenomena that suddenly turns things post-normal? How do things suddenly become post-normal? And what metaphor do we use? How do we represent it? Right? And we looked at various animals. I was very partial to pelicans, was it? No, puffins. Puffins. I was very partial to puffins, but these people shot it down. Then we had various other animals. Then we hit on the notion of jellyfish, and we all agreed on that simply because jellyfish have the ability to bloom instantly. They are fine when in a normal situation, but raise the temperature and salinity of the seawater, and they bloom spontaneously. And they have caused a lot of damage in nuclear power plants and in kind of aircraft carriers. Huh? Yeah, aircraft carriers everywhere. So so they became our mascot. So are you not wearing the T-shirt today? No. All right. So they became the jellyfish became our mascot. So we developed the idea of menagerie of post-normal times, which has been stolen by lots of people, by the way, I have to tell you. And then we also have to think of, well, how does the future change? How in relation to, and that was our first question. You remember that right from the beginning, when I involved in the future studies, I thought this is a tool that can be used to colonize as much as to liberate, right? So what do we do about that? And how does post-normal times make the future different from conventional nature of the future in future studies, in foresight studies, in anticipation, and all the other disciplines, right? So again, this was a napkin job. I was sitting with John Sweeney in a restaurant, really arguing, and I drew this diagram, and he then kind of slightly polished. This is the slightly polished version of my napkin diagram. And then he said, the argument is that we cannot look at the future simply in singular terms. We need to look at future in from different perspectives. So we came out with the notion that of the three tomorrows, that the future functions in relation to three tomorrows, right? You can go back to the diagram again. Yeah. The first is is what I always regarded as the colonized aspect of the future. And we said it's not even the future, it's just the extended present. Now, we know, for example, next year there will be iPhone 14, and the year after that will be iPhone 15, and so on and so forth. But we also know that this means that Apple will continue to colonize the world, right? So that is not really a future, it's just the present extended. And this is what, when most futurists do their work, this is where they're working. They're simply extrapolating from the present to the future. And it's within the framework of the post-normal times theory, it's not even the future, it's simply extended present. And then there are things in the future which are based on the images and metaphors that have become dominant. So now there's a lot of time, a lot of talk about airport flying taxis. In fact, there will be flying taxis appearing in the next 3 to 4 or 5 years, and certainly in the United States and maybe in the United Kingdom. Certain companies are already testing them in the United States. But where does the idea of flying taxi comes from? It comes from Jetsons, which is a cartoon in the 1970s, which was where the idea was first introduced. 1960s, yeah, the ideas was first introduced. So the images we see on advertising, on films, on in television screens, that we internalize them, right? And that's one kind of future. We did a workshop in Istanbul. I think Dr. Anas was present there, where we asked the gathering, which was basically about 20 PhD students. Some had started their PhDs, some were finishing their PhDs, to describe to me what kind of future they envision. And almost without exception, they described various films, the Terminator, the Fifth Element, Blade Runner, right? All their images so that the images they had seen, they had internalized, and that's how they see the future. So we then came up with the idea of the unthought future, the future that exists outside the framework of all this kind of conventional notion of what future studies is all about, what the future is all about. The unthought, the whole idea of unthought was developed from, taken from Arkoun, who was a well-known Algerian French writer, The Unthought of Islam is his book, where in fact he gives only 2 paragraphs to the idea of unthought. It's not really well developed in the book. Even the book is titled The Unthought. The actual notion, the concept only gets 2 paragraphs. So we had to really develop it to a much greater depth. And then this exercise then produced the 3 Tomorrows paper, the 3 Tomorrows of Post-Normal Times, which also highly cited now. So then here we have the icons for the 3 Tomorrows. We continued our work, and then we asked further questions. See, that Socrates comes in handy in these exercises. How does post-normal times kind of then increase uncertainties? And how given that things are going to be more and more uncertain, the post-normality introduces the notion of uncertainty, that if things are going to be more and more uncertain, then we will have more and more ignorance, clearly. With the lack of knowledge, uncertainty is essentially absence of knowledge of some kind. So there'll be a lot of ignorance. So we focus on these 2 ideas, uncertainties and ignorance, and we developed again. There was a great debate and discussion. Should we continue the threes? You see, the Trinity. And we thought that for the coherence of the theory, because the theory was developing more and more, it was becoming more sophisticated, that we should stick to there are various definitions of uncertainty and ignorances, right? But in post-normal times theory, we tried to kind of synthesize everything into 3. So we came up with 3 notions of uncertainty. The surface uncertainty that we may face. I will leave this because Jody is going to talk more about it in detail in his paper. And similarly, we came up with 3 notions of ignorance. Plain ignorance is the kind of ignorance we see every day, where it's not just absence of knowledge, but maybe prejudice, maybe political bias, ideology, etc., etc. Then we have the notion of vincible ignorance, where ignorance is a built-in component of the future, where you do not know something, but you could know that thing in the future, provided you do research. So a good example is in the pandemic, we had no vaccines. We didn't know there was any way of finding a vaccine, but research then revealed. So we were ignorant about the pandemic. We didn't know much about it. We had very little idea what COVID is, even though we knew what coronaviruses are, and we had no vaccines. But the research then produced both our knowledge about COVID-19 and the vaccines. And during that period, we were ignorant. So it's invincible. It's an ignorance that we can overcome. And finally, there's invincible ignorance, the ignorance that is essentially shaped by the assumptions and the presumptions you make, and you cannot overcome it as long as you exist within your paradigms of assumptions. If, for example, if you think you are superior to other people, right, then there's nothing that can convince you that you are not, unless you abandon the whole notion that you're superior. And so it's an invincible knowledge in that sense, that knowledge that requires you, it's an invincible ignorance, that ignorance that requires you to give up your basic assumptions that you've been relying on to shape your understanding of the world. Okay, so all that comes up together in the Post-Normal Times Reader, which Dr. Anas has already introduced. Volume 2 will come out soon. We're working on Volume 2, but Volume 1 is available. It's, I think, free to download if I'm not sure. And we did put some of the Post-Normal Times theory to work in looking at Muslim societies in Post-Normal Times. That's a book, and we also put some of that to work on the notion of epistemology. And the atlas. Can we actually see the atlas here? No, but it's very easy to access. So people have Wi-Fi. You can go down. You can go down and have a look at the atlas. And So once the theory was fully developed, or even while we were kind of developing the theory, we started teaching it in institutions. We started doing undergraduate courses since 2015 in Balankara University, which is where Jody teaches a course on something or the other, but basically he teaches post-normal times. You have to get these courses through the university, structures and all that. But in the Erasmus school in Brussels, it is actually called Post-Normal Times, where our colleague Maya Van Lampie teaches, has been teaching since 2016. We've also started doing postgraduate teaching at another university in Madrid, and also I think you're doing at your own university as well. Okay. And we've done some exhibitions of Post-Normal Times. The first exhibition we did was in Museum of Modern Art in Antwerp. It was attended by thousands and thousands. I mean, it's a major museum in a European city, so it was well attended. We did a second exhibition, which was in, well, I was going to say, unfortunately, in a smaller university, so not many people attended, but that's Jordi's problem. That was in Barcelona. We did, that was also quite successful. And again, here, the dean of his school came along, and the first thing he said, well, the Post-Normal Times doesn't really exist, but I'm very glad to open. I don't agree with it. But I'm very glad to open the exhibition. It looks very nice, and it's quite convincing. So I said, it is quite convincing. Why are you not convinced? But anyway, that was another story. So that was in Barcelona. And we have two milestones. So we have Leah Mayo, who is the first person to obtain a PhD in Post-Normal Times from Sunshine University, Sunshine West Coast University in Australia. His thesis is called Spaces. Hacking culture in post-normal times. So it's all about how culture is changing and how post-normal times is transforming culture. And our colleague Maya Van Lampie became the first, got the first UNESCO chair on future studies in post-normal times. There are lots of UNESCO chairs in future studies, but only one, which is called future studies in post-normal times. And then, of course, we had to do some work on the COVID. So COVID-19 is a very interesting thing. I have lots and lots of colleagues who kind of, meet me, say polite, hello, how are you? You're a wonderful man, you've done lots of work, but this post-normal time stuff, you should move on. And, okay, fine, thank you very much. Very nice meeting you. Right? And then I meet somebody else, you're a great scholar. I don't think I'm a great scholar, but thank you very much. But this post-normal time stuff, you're wasting your time. You should really be, writing the history of the universe or some rubbish like that. I said, fine, okay, move on. Come the pandemic, the phone didn't stop ringing. Actually, you were right. What the hell is going on here? You don't understand a single thing. Right? It's not just post-normal, it's post-normal. Right? So suddenly, the whole futures world, which was basically not quite sure of where we are going, because we are challenging them. It's like the general sociology that rejected the paper that because it challenged their basic assumptions. A lot of them were quite scared and saying, what the hell these guys are going? And they're very scared of me because as a futurist, I've always asked some fundamental questions to other futurists, right? But when the pandemic came, we didn't have to argue. We didn't have to argue our positions. People could see the world is going. The world is not normal anymore in many respects. So Jody and some colleagues did that, and then I wrote the Smog of Ignorance paper, which became quite kind of well-known and cited, and lots of people have commented on that, where I'm actually arguing that knowledge itself is now being transformed. The mode of production of knowledge is transformed. So you see how far we have come from Jerry's notion of post-normal science, right? In 1993, when he was trying to publish that post-normal science for post-normal age paper and couldn't publish it, to now where we are with the smog of ignorance. right? It's not just that science is going post-normal, but the very mode of production of knowledge has gone post-normal with big data, with artificial intelligence, with all the other kind of social media stuff and fake news and, you know, deep fake and et cetera, et cetera. So knowledge production itself is totally, utterly transformed. So we did a special issue of World Futures Review, which came out last year, devoted to post-normal matters, which now, by the way, surprise, surprise, is edited by our old friend John Sawyer. It's such a small world, isn't it? Right. So let me just sort of conclude. So what have we learned? What are we saying at the end of the day? What is post-normal times all about? What post-normal time is saying, the conventional future, the future, as an identity outside and beyond us is invalid. In conventional future studies is always out there. We are saying, no, future studies is something that is happening here and it's within us. Futures is something that is happening now, it's transforming, and it is within us. So post-normal times emphasizes the future is ever-changing and omnipresent force in the present, and we are always inside the future. So conventional approaches to understanding the future seeks to manage and control the future. In fact, the first paper I wrote, Welcome to Post-Normal Times, it says the notion of control and managing the future is out of window. And also the idea of efficiency is out of the window. There is so much you can do to make any system efficient. And then it reaches a point beyond which the more effort you try to make it into a more efficient, the less efficient it becomes. It's called Jivan's paradox, in a sense. So all that notions are out. And if you are dealing with the idea of managing and control, then you're only dealing with extended present and familiar futures. Post-normal time stresses the future cannot be controlled or managed in any way, but it can be navigated. You have to find methods of navigating or way out of post-normal times to something that lies beyond it, whatever we may call it. Conventional approach to understanding the future seeks, we did all that. You mean, oh, yeah, I got you. If you are studying image of the future, this is by the way, I literally lifted this up from Liam's thesis on hacking post-normal culture. This example that if you're studying the image of the future, you're not studying the future, you're studying a drop of rain that is an image of the future as climate. Right, so that's a very profound way of putting what we are really talking about. So post-normal future accepts that we are part of something greater, yeah, whatever you like to call it, and that constantly impacts us. That we and our future are intimately connected to non-human parts of the biosphere, which is what Dr. Natalia was talking about, my ideas on ecology. In a sense, you cannot separate, we are not separate from nature, but we are intimately connected to nature. And post-normal futures are epistemologically, ontologically non-hierarchical, a web of open and complex systems that remind us that future is an already existing totality for which we are directly responsible. You know, we have a responsibility. We shape the future in how we behave. Is it the final one? And finally, post-normal time series seeks to do away with the Western ontological construction of subject-object in favor of universal ontology, where all objects and subjects have equal representation, credence, whatever you like to call it. And we want to move beyond the kind of post-normal notion of being, right? Also in some Islamic thought, and move to a more kind of holistic notion of becoming. If the future is always present with us, we are always becoming something in that sense. And then some of these ideas will appear in the Emerging Epistemology book, which is, I think, about to go to the printers. And inshallah will be out very, very soon. We will continue to do polylogs. This is the one that I did at Expo in Dubai last year. No, before we go there, just one other thing that is essential. In all our work that we've been working for 10 years as a network, as a team. In all our work, one thing is essential. And that is, we must have fun. Mm-hmm. right? Ideas are fun. Criticism can be fun. Counter-criticism is fun. You must enjoy what you're doing. And if you don't enjoy what you're doing, you're not going to do productive work, right? So even those of you who have seen us engage each other, we are always kind of joking and having fun. That's part. And in that joking and having fun, some very profound ideas will emerge. Often in coaches, when we're going from one place to another, in a hotel restaurant, we are talking about an idea comes in, etc., etc. So fun is very, very important, and we will hopefully continue to have fun. And one aspect of the fun is that my colleague here is a cartoonist. I mean, I didn't even know that. I mean, I've known him for 30 years, and at almost every meeting he draws a cartoon of me. I don't know why. This maybe he just mad. And this one is done in Bucharest, not Bucharest, in Danube Delta, where we were having a workshop on crazy futures. There's a series of workshops I used to organize called Crazy Futures. And that workshop was really, really totally mad in many respects. And I was kind of dressed like this as a leader of the workshop, arguing with everybody. And so we conclude with Jordi's cartoon. Thank you very much. Salam.
So Zia, I was right asking you to tell us something about history, because history overweighted the current developments. But I think our audience got enough food for thought. And we do need a break to digest that, and we can do that through our coffee break. So we are meeting back, coming back into the hall at 12. So please enjoy your conversation, coffee break. You may go to the hall.
Hello?
Oh, well, the critical thing are the translators.
Hello, hello. So
I think it's fine. But you don't know if they will hear it.
The critical thing are the,
It's also YouTube streaming, then it will be saved in the YouTube conference.
И нет, просто вот,
I want to do it standing up. I think that the people can hear me fine. The only concern are translators, because they only hear through headphones. So if they cannot listen to me, then this cannot come. But I'm hopeful. This is enough.
Yeah.
Hello,
Oh, yeah. And you present your point, you project your voice.
ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. So, can you hear me? Okay, so if I do it like this, it's okay for you? Excellent.
Только бы пожрать, вот это вот.
All right, so our time for coffee break is over. We continue the first part of our first day. And from the previous presentation, which Dr. Sardar made, we have to understand that post-normal time is not something light that we can discard easily. It penetrates many fields of social life, including education and policymaking. And the next topic, which will be presented by Dr. Jordi Serra del Pina, Deputy Director, the Center for Postnormal Policy and Future Studies, is particularly about this postnormal time in education and policy making. Jordi, the floor is yours.
If you don't mind, I think I'd rather be standing. At least I will be able to see you better and also be able to see the screen, because otherwise it's difficult. If you please could upload my presentation, it would be helpful. Well, it's post-normal times after all. Well, since, okay, I will make a little bit of spoilers while we wait. The general subject of the conference is challenges of post-normal times. I've been asked to talk about education and policy making, so I will try to elaborate on which are the main challenges that post-normal times pose to both education and policy making. And I'm running out of jokes, so you better.
You haven't made any.
I am the joke.
Oh, you are the joke.
Okay. I feel like at home.
Maybe pull the chair back and sit down and wait for the
Yeah, okay.
system to start. Yes. It's too big. Not critical. Situation not critical, but just the system. Yeah. Reminds me of the UN. Or the
Oh, almost there.
right.
Oh, no. Okay, full screen, please. No. That. Yes, this is the right presentation in full screen, if possible. That would make my day. That's what. Okay, there we are. Okay, so education in post-normal times in education and policy making. So the first part of my presentation will be the challenges that post-normal times pose to education. Education, I'm using this definition from UNESCO, is actually the fourth sustainable development goal. Education is either the process of facilitating learning or of acquiring knowledge, skill, values, beliefs, and habits. It's interesting because traditionally education has been mostly focused in the second part. How can we transmit? How can we pass contents, material? It is few decades from since that we have been more and more moving into the learning part of education. I take that most of us are in academia, and it's commonly assumed that if you educate, someone learns. Okay, technology is failing me. But that's not always the case. Sometimes we manage to learn despite education, but lately we're trying to focus more and more on how we can help people learn. The first challenge is the nature of post-normal times itself. So I'm recovering the definition of Professor Sardar. The first thing, okay, this notion that post-normal time is a transitional period. So we know that many things we teach are contingent. May be relevant now, but may not be so in the future. With post-normal times, you know for sure. Whatever you teach now, it may be out of the real soon. Particularly because in this period, one of the main features is this all orthodoxies, including knowledge, is dying. So the problem or the tragedy, if you want, is that many things we are teaching now are beginning to be very irrelevant for the people that are receiving this material. To make the thing even more interesting, we do not have a full replacement in place. We are trying to get new ideas, new theories, but they are not totally there yet. So we are trying to make the best with whatever is available, trying to keep adding new ideas, but there we are. And as a result, we are in this continuous state of perplexities. And the students felt it more acutely than us. More and more the students rebel against professors, against teachers, because they realize that whatever they are being taught is becoming less and less relevant for them. The second challenge has to do with one of our main concepts, the manufactured normalcy field that my colleague Scott will develop later on, but let me just give you the essentials. It's one of our main concepts, but it's not really ours. It was coined by Venkatesh Rao. He first created it in a post in his blog, Welcome to the Future Nations. And the field can be described as the byproduct of being raised, as a byproduct of us creating, producing our mind. Not the brain we are born with, but the mind is something we have to develop. We need to be acculturated in one tradition. Okay, thank you. And the first thing is that, okay, it becomes an intellectual operating system of sorts. You see, our brain is constantly trying to save energy. So it's always looking for systems that reduce the energy consumption of our brain. So if certain ideas can be hardwired, it will require less thinking. For instance, all of us, one of the first things we learn is a language. We think every language there's a time conception. I suppose that for most of us, it's linear. There's the past, there's the present, there's the future, and we go in this direction. Because of that, our languages have verb tenses. Now, try to think without verb tenses. For me, it's very difficult. It's almost impossible. And we know that there are cultures, there are languages without verb tenses. So that means that once this part of the wild view, if you want, is, let's say, downloaded to our brain, we no longer keep thinking about it. We just use it. So it becomes like a sort of the equivalent to some body functions, like blinking, the heart pumping, sweating. These are things that our body does automatically. I am not thinking, Jordi, breathe, blink. No, it's taken care. So some of these intellectual things become more or less the same. All this, we could say it's mostly positive. But there is a part that it's relevant for us, that ultimately the field tends to condition the way we perceive reality and make sense of it. Why so? Because our field feels more comfortable within this arrangement: surface uncertainty and plain ignorance. Surface uncertainty is that kind of uncertainty that doesn't really bother us. That is, we do not find it challenging. Well, there may be things that we don't know, but it's like the Apple example that Zia has explained before. If all of us spend some time right now, right here, trying to think how it's going to be the next iPhone, I bet we will be pretty right. And it's not challenging because we know that whatever we need to add to our conscience is already there. So it's like there's a pool of a capital of knowledge that we can tap into and we can learn. This is plain ignorance. Maybe I do not know something, but I know that this knowledge exists somewhere out there, or there are expert books or whatever I can access and learn. And why the field likes this arrangement of surface uncertainty and plain ignorance so much? Because it's the arrangement that allows the field to use all its bag of tricks. And do not get me wrong when I say bag of tricks, but you will, I hope, understand what I mean. The first thing, linear thinking. We like very much linear thinking. One of our ancestors at some point discovered that certain phenomena precede others. So maybe birds flying low could mean rain, animals fleeing maybe an earthquake. That was valuable knowledge. Later on, elaborating on that, we discovered causality. Sometimes we get it wrong, concurrency, causality, but that was a phenomenal groundbreak. It allowed our knowledge to give a quantum leap forward. And we are still always looking for this. Whenever there's a problem, our first instinct is to try to find a cause, to act on the cause. Dichotomic thinking, another wonderful tool. If something is right, the opposite must be wrong. If something is true, the opposite must be false. Remember that the brain likes to save energy. Well, with something like that, you get all your thinking effort cut in half. You only concentrate in proving half of the proposition, and the other can be deducted. Wonderful tool. Induction has worked so well. Out of a limited observation, we can deduct general principles, the foundation of most of our science. Specialization. Our knowledge has got so big that we have had to segment in. And that's probably the foundation of academia. And here we are in a university, and out there in that wonderful diorama, we can see the different faculties that host the different kind of knowledge. So this has worked very well. I am by no means trying to diminish. We have gone to the moon using this approach, but we are in post-normal times. The problem with the field in education, when you apply this all normal, manufactured normative field in traditional education, well, it tends to favor the transmission of contents that can be learned by memory, by heart. Because once you learn it, you no longer need to think about it. So we ask kids to learn how to multiply, and it sometimes is a pain in the ass, as anyone who has a kid knows. But once they learn, it's a job that pays off. But of course, it departmentalizes knowledge. Essentially, what we do is we trade perspective for depth. So we get to be very good, very knowledgeable, very wise in a narrow part of the knowledge spectrum, but sometimes at the cost of losing this perspective. Of course, it upholds, I always have a hard time saying this, hierarchy. Thank you, Zia. Teacher knows, the student don't. So the teacher speaks, the student listens. But the worst implication is that it discourages critical thinking. I could even say it discourages thinking in general, but particularly critical, because to be critical, you consume a lot of energy, as we can say. That's why we do the best thinking we do is at lunches and meals, because we are getting sugar or other kinds of energy that the brain likes. So, okay, this is the arrangement that the field likes. What is the problem with this arrangement in post-normal times? That it doesn't work very well when the factors kick in. Complexity. Notice that our first instinct is always to try to simplify a complex issue. How many variables we can leave out? Let's just focus on the main one. Well, this may be news, but with complex phenomena, there are no main and secondary variables. You have to work with all of them. Chaos, nonlinear behavior. My God, I mean, my students, whenever I put chaos, they instantly assume that it's going to be something bad. And contradictions. Contradictions, when I was a student, were these kind of things that the teacher would tell me, this is the exception that confirms the rule. So we tend to try to sweep them under the rug. But you know, in post-normal times, contradictions are golden, because our brain may not be very good at spotting or dealing with complexity and chaos, but we can recognize contradictions. If you try to determine, if you are looking at a post-normal phenomenon, if you spot a contradiction, you may be right on business. And of course, change features, things going fast, getting globally, having multidimensional effects, happening simultaneously with other things. No, come on, let's do one thing at a time. So, post-normal times essentially disrupt the, let's say, traditional normal manufactured normalcy field. So, those of us that are futurists, we do not have a real problem moving to invincible ignorance. The one thing we have learned is that to be really able to anticipate the future, you cannot just use few disciplines. At least you have to be able to use knowledge and sources from many different disciplines. You need to be able to move through different approaches. Because the other thing we have learned is that these things that we are fairly sure that we know in which direction change is going, the impact, well, sometimes it's not the case. It's not surface, it's shallow uncertainty. The things that we do not know are more than we like to think. Therefore, we need to tap into all available knowledge, collaborate with them, and sometimes accept that it's only with the pass of time that we will gain the insight necessary to develop the required knowledge. And I believe more and more members of academia are coming to this realization as well. The one lesson Okay, thank you. The one lesson we learned during postnormal time, this 10 years, a little bit more, we have been working on it, is that there are questions in which it's not that we just don't know the answers. It's that we don't even know how to make the right question. These are deep uncertainty issues. And when you are in deep uncertainty, the problem is not what you don't know. Quite frequently is what you think you knew. So when I told Zia that his paper really was an illumination for me, is because I got it. It's not that we are getting the future wrong because we do not have good data, good methods. Is we are departing from a wrong perspective of reality. We are letting our knowledge to act in a prioristic way determine what may happen. No, invincible ignorance calls us to call into question our worldview. So there's a question I always ask my students. Do you think what you think because of what you see? Or do you see what you see because of what you think? We like to think it's the first one, that we are empirical sentient beings, that we let reality reach us and out of that we process. But the truth is that many times we are jumping to conclusions. And when it comes to future, even more. So invincible ignorance is absolutely necessary. So how should it be education in postnormal times? This is still a work in progress, but let me share some of our conclusions. First of all, it must concentrate on the conditions for learning to be a continuous endeavor, not just this label lifelong learning, that we say it and, oh, that's cool, we are right. No, no. How can we make this to be a reality? And this reality must be based on, first of all, appreciation, not just acknowledgement, not just tolerance, no, appreciation. Complexity may be a pain in the back when you are working, but complexity is key in evolution. We are here precisely because complexity has taken this far. Therefore, we need to develop a new way to approach it. And uncertainty, as unsettling or stressing it may be, it's fundamental for instance, for freedom. If things would be totally certain, why bother studying the future? Uncertainty is what really gives us an edge, a deeper understanding of contradictions. That definition from Sia, all orthodoxies are dying and new ones are yet to be born. This is a particular kind of contradiction. It's not just a logical opposition between two things. It's like a cognitive dissonance. We are trying to make sense of what is happening with tools that no longer serve us, and we do not have the new ones. So contradictions is the best proof that we are in postnormal times. A willingness to move through different levels of ignorance. We are so good at playing ignorance. It's the one level my students can do without sweating. When I ask them to move to invincible, okay, they work in groups, not teams, just groups. Invincible, it's hard. It's hard for all of us. But it may not be necessary for every single thing, but we certainly need to be better at it. And this thing that today everything must be inter, multi, or trans, it cannot be just a hype. Knowledge is intrinsically holistic. So either we are able to do this different approach or we are in trouble. Climate change cannot be solved just from one discipline. Any of the global challenges, if you go through the Sustainable Development Goals, you cannot approach them from one single discipline. You need to develop a way to use all of them. Okay, we lost the animation. Anyway, so the conclusion would be that we need to create new disciplines, narrative discourse, based on the recognition of the postnormal condition, what Zia just introduced at the end of his presentation. And in relation to education, two things may be also very important. Critical curiosity must be encouraged, actively encouraged. There's no better way to learn that when you are eager to know, to discover something. The same way that there's no better water than when you are thirsty, how sweet that water feels when you are really thirsty. When you are really trying to understand something is when you really learn. So curiosity is something that it's not a plus, it's not something, well, if we have it, okay. We should devote a great effort to make our students more curious, but critically curious. We must accept that our students can and should challenge us when they believe that we are wrong. I mean, for me, it's the best part of teaching. I'm fed up of listening to myself saying the same thing. But the fact that sometimes one of my students asks a new question that makes me think, wow, this is cool. And of course, be humble. Because the only thing you really learn when you enhance your knowledge is how little you know in comparison to all that there is to learn. Okay, so let's move on to policymaking. What is policymaking? So essentially, it's usually in different places, maybe slightly different, but it's a structured process to define a policy that ordinarily is conducted by government, administrations, for instance, political parties. And a policy. Well, a policy, we could define it as a mechanism, as an arrangement that incorporates different elements, different features, political, fiscal, administrative, managerial, to deploy a set of actions intended to attain explicit predetermined goal. We want to end poverty. We want to end illiteracy. We want to end gender violence. So we set up a policy that includes many measures or a group of measures to reach